Worcester at the intermodal yard near the Port of Worcester. It's the Providence and Worcester Railroad area. And I'm looking at a CSX train right now that has just stopped in the yard. It was moving. I didn't quite catch it moving.
I'd like to tell you a story about a nearly 300-year-old industry and how its operation still affects us to this day. It's a story about workers versus corporations, and about the safety and well-being of everyone who works in the industry, as well as everyday people. It is the story of railroads, specifically freight railroads, and a concept created by a man named Hunter Harrison, which would later be called precision scheduled railroading. In February 2021, Chris Martin, a signalman working for Union Pacific, was encouraged by his union representative to leave the company where he had worked for 10 years. Years of working under the new conditions of precision scheduled railroading, or PSR, though he hadn't heard the term until around 2017, had taken a huge toll on him, and his union rep wasn't the only one who thought it would be best for him to leave UP.
My mental health last 3 years has been absolutely terrible. Absolutely terrible. I mean, I've been seeing a therapist now for 5 years. The last 3 years, my therapist told me to quit my job.
At an already grueling job with, as Chris pointed out, a high rate of depression, divorce, and suicide among its workers, he felt like Union Pacific had totally destroyed any semblance of respect or caring for their workers. Under PSR, the company had furloughed, according to Chris, between 7,000 and 10,000 employees and extended the responsibilities of those who were left. Plus, during the COVID pandemic, their apparent failure to take care of their employees seriously affected Chris's mental state at work.
The railroad companies are not valuing their employees. They view them as an enemy. You're treated like an enemy. I mean, we don't get sick days. There's no craft has sick days. We just went through a pandemic.
A combination of all these factors led to his departure.
That made me toxic at work and made me a liability at work that they basically told me that you need to go home forever. And that's a bad choice on my part. But I can tell you right now, I do not believe I could ever work for Union Pacific if I was even given a redo, because they have had such a toxic culture and they have every excuse to be toxic when they could have been better.
So what exactly is PSR? I spoke to Howard Green, author of Railroader, The Unfiltered Genius and Controversy of four-time CEO Hunter Harrison, about Harrison's original vision.
Trains only make money when they're moving. You know, run them on time, run them faster, run them longer, measure everything. When you moved the shipments, the freight, more precisely on time for customers, then you could charge a premium price compared to everybody else who was, delivering it whenever.
But Hunter Harrison, being intelligent enough to rise up from a yard worker to a four-time CEO, likely knew that it wasn't as simple as that. In fact, both Howard Green and Chris Martin expressed that many customers are actually dissatisfied with PSR, as it means trains leave without picking up shipments that don't quite make it on time, often leaving them out in the cold. According to Green, trains no longer run on the customer's timetable, but rather on their own. The key to really understanding PSR, though, is to realize that it is, at its heart, a trade-off, exchanging jobs, customer satisfaction, and potentially safety standards for increased shareholder profits. During my interview with Howard Green, there were a few instances where he came very close to saying this outright, but ultimately refocused on the subject of profit.
Big debate about the costs of precision schedule railroading. Yes, makes a lot of money for railroads and shareholders, but because of precision schedule railroading, the major railroads have all become more efficient by the metric Hunter made famous, which is the so-called operating ratio. It's the key figure that the market looks at, and it's expenses over revenues. So you want lower expenses and higher revenues so that the number after you divide that is a lower number. So when he went to CN, got it down to 62, which is enormous. I mean, that's a huge improvement it's the profit margin of the railroad.
In fact, Green stated explicitly that Hunter Harrison understood and was not, quote, sentimental about the fact that PSR necessitated massive layoffs. Harrison was apparently known as a hard driver. The CFO of Canadian National at the time, at one point, even expressed this characterization to Green.
Michael Sabia said to me, I had the pleasure of working with Hunter, not for Hunter. And I expect those were two different experiences.
But it's not just layoffs that are the problem. Vice News reports that rail workers, quote, barely recognize the work that they do. According to these rail workers, as reported by Vice, railroad corporations have begun cutting safety corners in dangerous ways, leading to major derailments.
I should also point out that I'm looking at the track directly in front of me, which the Amtrak is on. So I don't know if CSX actually has jurisdiction over this track I'm looking at, but the spikes on the railroad ties connecting the tracks to the ties, like a lot of them are completely out of there. I mean, there's one that's completely like almost out. It's not secured at all. I mean, it's the track is in okay condition other than that, but I mean, it's looking pretty rickety.
One recent derailment occurred in 2017 on a track in Hindman, Pennsylvania, flattening a house and damaging two others. According to the National Transportation Safety Board, the main cause was a hastily assembled train with improperly distributed weight. Vice also reports that, quote, haphazard train car arrangements are a hallmark of PSR. The rail workers also claim that maintenance is not being performed as often as it normally should, and routes have been changed to allow for fewer inspection stops. Something that Chris Martin pointed out to me was that these massive layoffs paired with the pushing the limits approach of PSR is another major reason for safety problems.
I'm not sure PSR is the way to go for any railroad simply because you're putting too much stress on the routes that make money and you're not giving the people the time to make the repairs that maintenance required. They are giving track maintainers and signal maintainers more territory to cover than they did before while running more trains, which gives them less opportunities to inspect and repair.
Chris went on to explain in more detail about how larger areas for fewer repair workers to cover leads in delays in response time, and also about how busier lines can exacerbate safety issues.
When you're trying to do a crossing in Tucson, Arizona, which has close to 1 million people now, in the county at least, on a busy road, I'm trying to shut down a road and get a hold of tracks. It makes my job much more difficult logistically and safely. And this is a PSR problem.
It seems like rail workers in general agree that safety has taken a backseat to efficiency. In a YouTube video, Jason Cox, national representative from the Brotherhood of Railway Carmen, said, quote, more equipment has derailed during the last 4 years than I have remembered in the previous 20. Chris Martin had a similar comment, saying that his home subdivision in Phoenix, Arizona has seen a severe increase in derailments over the last 2 years. Vice News also reported that Jeremy Ferguson, Smart TD union president, said it's going to end up like Boeing, presumably referring to the two 737 MAX plane crashes that brought the aircraft company's safety standards into serious question. But despite these concerns coming from the people on the ground, railroad corporations insist that there are no issues. Vice reports that Cindy Shield, director of media relations at CSX, a massive Class 1 railroad in the US, said CSX significantly improved our safety performance as evidenced by the metrics reported to our federal regulator, the FRA, Federal Railroad Administration. Even Howard Green, who is well recognized for his extensive coverage of the 1998 Swissair plane crash, including a feature-length documentary on the subject, did not give any clear stance on Jeremy Ferguson's prediction.
Well, it's hard to predict the future is all I will say. But what I will say, based on my experience making that film and studying that accident in great deal for 4 years, more than 4 years, it's very difficult to point to one thing as the cause of an accident. Accidents are typically the result of a chain of events.
Now, to be clear, the Federal Railroad Administration statistics support the claim that Cindy Shield made about safety performance. Across the board, Class 1 railroads have actually had fewer accidents, including derailments, than in previous years, according to their statistics. Maricopa County, Arizona, which includes the city of Phoenix, has seen fairly stable derailment numbers since 2013. However, Chris is right that casualties have increased at Union Pacific over the past few years, as evidenced by the FRA's own data, though not as severely as he stated, and went on to say that even professional statisticians and professors understand that statistics can be manipulated. He also brought up another more pressing reason why reports of workplace injuries might follow the same disconnect between personal experience and the official statistics.
There is, without a shadow of a doubt, do not report that. Do not report that.
It is also worth pointing out, in regards to Howard Green's comment about accidents never being the result of a single issue, that PSR is a holistic business model with many different facets and involving many different aspects of the rail system. If something goes wrong, it is either the personal fault of those on the scene or the result of many factors which all relate to the way a railroad is run. And PSR is now that way in most of the Class 1 railroads in the US and Canada. In any event, it is pretty clear that safety standards have indeed been pared down, and it has become increasingly hard for the few remaining rail workers to do their job properly. Class 1 railroads seem very focused on shareholder profits, putting the well-being of their workers in jeopardy. The old curse of capitalism, for better or for worse. And this is not just an issue for employees. Workers who are overtired, disgruntled, and unable to do their jobs properly are at a significant safety risk for railroads. Plus, as Chris touched on in our interview, people who live near freight lines are mostly poor, disadvantaged, and non-white, or are homeless people who live in makeshift communities next to freight lines where no one else wants to live. These are the everyday people who are directly in harm's way when a train comes off the tracks. Chris spoke unequivocally about the effects railroads have on severely disadvantaged and struggling people.
I mean, it is a problem. It's a safety problem because from so many standpoints, one, it's bad for their ears. It's unsafe amount of fumes and oil and stuff that falls off trains. These people have mental health issues, physical health issues, and get murdered by a train because maybe they're whacked out of their mind because they're sick or they're a drug addict. And I mean, I'm not here to judge. I mean, this is what happens. These people get hit by trains.
This whole area is pretty incredible. I mean, it's multi-level bridges and yards, all different directions. I mean, there's a lot of activity here, but it's hard to actually, it's a lot for a railroad. It's hard to actually catch trains in motion.
I spoke to Chris Martin while he was in the process of being taken on by a new, smaller railroad business and staying in a hotel room fully paid for by his new company. When he spoke about his future, it was like a catharsis. After years at a company he described as toxic, his new employer seemed like the exact opposite.
I've been off work for 2 months. My mental health has never been better. My physical health has never been better. I found another job. I make like $3 an hour less, and I'll be home more. It's a great trade. There is ways you can treat your people. And I am seeing that here with my new job. My first day, like I said, I got 7 new masks. Just the fact that my supervisor was on the phone with me and responding was huge. I was given brand new tools, no questions asked. I was given swag. You know, I'm brand new, never been in the field with these guys, but I already feel better and more comfortable about what I'm going to be doing because I was treated.
So Chris is doing pretty well now and things are looking up for him. But how many tens of thousands of workers are still suffering under PSR, especially during the COVID pandemic? Employees of the railroads who have adopted PSR are not happy, to say the least. And not only is that an issue for their own well-being, but it is a public safety issue. If PSR is causing employees to perform less well, accidents have the potential to become much more common, and by some accounts already are. It's not just the smaller accidents that are piling up, however, and major disasters involving trains, especially ones carrying hazardous cargo, can be devastating. Just last July, as Chris mentioned at one point in our interview, a train carrying flammable cargo derailed in a bridge in Tempe, Arizona, right near the University of Arizona. There was a massive fire and plumes of black smoke choked the immediate area. According to Catherine Holland of Phoenix News, one train car carrying a flammable toxic chemical used in nylon paint began leaking into a storm drainage system. Luckily, no one was seriously injured, but it could have been much worse. What if the incident had been more akin to what happened in Hindman? Or, even worse, like in Lac Mégantic, Quebec, where a petroleum-filled train destroyed an entire downtown area, killing 47 according to the New York Times, and injuring more. It is hard to quantify what hasn't happened yet. And to be fair, the correlation between PSR and accident trends does not necessarily equate to causation. But PSR is considered to be a prime culprit for many, and even beyond accidents, the effects of PSR on rail workers is pretty clear. Judging by discussions in the Reddit community r/railroading alone, PSR continues to be an intensely hot poker in the eye for those who work for most Class 1 railroads in the US and Canada. In any case, such instability in the industry makes the future unclear. Chris Martin plainly thinks that PSR is simply an unsustainable practice, but he was also quick to point out that he might be completely wrong. Either way, the companies will survive. It's just a question of how the people on the ground will come out on the other end.
it's a scary, there's something's going to happen. Something has to happen, or they continue this luck and they continue to do what they do, and they're the beasts that they are.
Big thanks to Howard Green and Chris Martin, who were both wonderful to talk with. This has been James Cerrone with MCC Communication, and thank you for listening.